This cabinet is the original cabinet that came with the house, and it was brown. So I used the enamel cabinet paint to repaint them. I took all the hardware off, took the doors off to paint this part. And now that I've got the doors painted, I'll be putting those back on. We did, however, replace the countertop. And this was a standard size, so it wasn't that costly. Although it was actually a half-inch, a little bit half-inch too long, so I had to do some fancy work here. I had to cut part of the wall out, and the countertop actually goes in the wall, and then I had to rebuild the wall around it because I didn't want to have to move the whole wall. So I made it work, so you can't hardly tell that there's a problem there. See that you don't see the edge there, but on this other side you can see the groove, the edge, where this is just butted up against the wall. It's quite a tight fit, but we made it work. We didn't want to go with a custom size because it's a lot more expensive. But these things are so much better. What we had here before were plastic, and they were just absolutely ugly, and you can't get them to look clean. This is so much nicer, and it just goes better with my entire bathroom. The type of paint that I'm using is enamel, and it's designed for cabinets. It is an oil-based paint, and what I love about it is it goes on really smooth. Since my other table was occupied, I needed another table to paint on. I didn't have another table, so I had to create one. So I took 2 TV stands and I set them apart, and then I put a piece of particle board that I had and just laid it across, and then I covered it with brown paper bags. I always keep my brown paper bags. They are great for covering a surface so that you don't get paint all over the place. And then when I'm going to paint anything, I don't want that object to stick to the paper. So I brought 2 boards from my workshop so that I could just set my doors on top. And that way I have less of a surface touching, you know, I don't want, because if I was painting this edge and I were laying it on the side, it would be stuck to the paper, and we don't want that. Here are some doors that I've painted with the enamel paint, and I'm just really impressed with the paint. It goes on pretty smooth. I painted 2 layers of the paint, went over it once and then let it dry, and then came back and did the second layer and make sure it's thoroughly dry. And then you can easily flip the door over. You notice that I have 2 boards down there. That is to keep it from the door getting stuck to the paper here. It's usually a good idea to kind of move it a little bit after you've painted it to make sure it's not stuck to even that board. To paint it, I use this great little roller. It's got a very smooth texture to it, and you just roll it on, and you can get right in the grooves there. I did not have to use a brush at all. This you roll right on top. You can even go right over the edges, and the way that this is shaped, you can even go right in this little groove like that, and it works. It worked great. So that's what I used. Just that. I did not have to use a brush at all to cover the cabinets, and the paint, when it dries, it actually dries pretty smooth. I really like the enamel. I hate the cleaning up part of it, but I love the end product of using enamel paint. It is a semi-gloss paint for designed for cabinets, and it gives you a nice finish that you can wipe down with the cloth. You do have to be careful of drips, but if you should get some drips, you can smooth it off with steel wool. Steel wool comes in different grades. This is coarse, and it is a number 3. So this might be a little bit too coarse. This is very fine steel wool, and this is 000. So you can go over even you can use this on stained wood, even after you've stained it. You can use it on paint, and it can help smooth off any imperfections that you might have with your paint job or staining job. When working with steel wool, make sure you wear gloves so you don't get any of those fibers into your hands, because that could become an irritant. There's fibers from the steel wool that I had right here. So when you're done with your cabinet, make sure you go over it with maybe a damp rag to just clean up all of those little fibers that might be left behind, especially if you're going to go back over it and if you decide to put another layer of paint where you sanded. So make sure it's cleaned of all of the fibers before you repaint if you feel like you need to. So my painting process, I would paint 2 coats. First I go over each of the doors with 1 coat. I let that dry a little bit, and I come back and I paint a second layer, and then I give it sufficient time to be thoroughly dry so it's not tacky at all, maybe several hours. And then I just flip the door over and paint the other side, doing the same thing. Do 1 layer, let it dry, come back, do a second layer, and I let the whole thing dry overnight. When closing the can, so you don't splatter the paint, put a rag on it. And this is the type of mallet that you use. It's a rubber mallet to close it, because you don't want to use a regular hammer because you'll mess up. Because you don't want to beat this with a regular hammer because you'll mess it up. And this is, I'm not finished painting with it. I want to continue to use it. So I want to take, good care of this. Now, when working with enamel, oil-based paint, for cleanup, we use paint thinner. And you don't want to soak your brushes in the paint thinner. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit in the jar. And you want to put your brush in there, but don't keep your brush in there a long time. And then just kind of wipe it off on the rag to get off most of it. You want to dispose of your rags when you're using paint thinner to wherever you get rid of chemical waste. Let me do it a second time. I'm using warm soapy water to try to get most of the paint off of the brush and the roller. Using Dawn dish soap. I do not have a brush comb. Here just to make sure that you get most of the paint out. Just try to squeeze to get most of the paint out of the roller. Sometimes you get a little bit of paint on you. Use a little bit of linseed oil. That's one thing I don't like about using oil-based enamel paint, is it is such a pain to clean up. Especially, it really clings to the fingernails. I have it up underneath my fingernails. I'm using linseed oil. And it takes off some of it, but not all of it. So it'll take me a few days to get all of this off me. It's thoroughly dry. Now these doors, they're painted last night, so I am ready to put these doors on the cabinets because they're finished. When I'm putting the doors up, I put in one screw at the top hinge and one screw at the bottom hinge so that I can kind of keep it steady before I come back and do all the screws. Now I just need to do the bottom ones. Okay, hinges are on. Now for the doorknob. I don't have to worry about drilling holes because the holes are already there, because these are the cabinet doors that came on them before. There. Cabinet doors are finished. That color is much nicer than the brown.